The financial crisis part 2 is apparent. It's in our faces, but we just have to open our eyes. The weakness which was exposed leading up to 2008 were never corrected. Today, the same issues have been multiplied as they branch out into new levels of financial insanity. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today, I have decided to pack more articles, more information than I should into one video. Let's see how it goes. Beginning with this. The IMF regularly releases reports, and I do believe that while their activities and actions are terrible, their reports are actually good. The problem, according to fund economists, is that already corporate credit fundamentals in the US have started to weaken, creating conditions that have historically preceded a credit cycle downturn. And by the IMF calculations, companies with almost $4 trillion in assets, or 22% of the total US corporate assets, would be weak or vulnerable to a fiscal expansion that went wrong and led to a sharp rise in borrowing costs. We're talking about the increase of interest rates. Even the BIS, the Bank for International Settlement, says that 250 basis points would be disastrous, particularly for Canada. We are looking at the IMF, and we need to step back and realize what's going on. Obviously, they're on the inside of all these deals. They are the financial goon squad. They are the ones who have the say in a lot of countries' aspects, financial aspects, and they try to have their hands on everyone's business. But the way I like to deal with them is I read the information and I see how that correlates with what I have found. And I do agree with what they say in principle here in this case. And connected in with that, percentage of what they call challenged firms, percent of total assets, you can see this in a chart form. As you can see, $4 trillion in assets, 22%. Whether it's weak or vulnerable, to me, it doesn't matter. They couldn't even predict the housing boom in the US, and it was going to a level that was so dramatic. There was so much fraud, but nobody wanted to investigate all that fraud because everybody was making money. But people with no jobs or anything to their name were buying multiple houses. And somebody at some point should have said something. But it didn't happen. And the fraud was allowed to continue. And guess what? This time around, the same thing is happening. And people, every single time, refuse to believe it, and they get caught in the mess. There are a lot of people who earn money, but unfortunately, when the time comes, they don't sell, and as a result, their money declines rapidly. And a lot of those people end up selling when they get shaken out. They get in that fear mode, and they get shaken out at the wrong time. Had they held on for a longer period of time, maybe it would have been better. But a lot of people get shaken out. Some people will have the guts. Others, I believe, should employ what I call the money GPS strategy. But anyway, let's move on. It's a silly example here, but I'm sure most of the people watching have seen this. Wile E. Coyote. I always found it funny that he left the edge of the cliff and was able to walk off, and it, of course, can't show you in the image, but it's as if he's on the platform still, at least in his mind or in his actions. He still walks out, and it's not for a delayed period of time before he heads downward. And that's the way I see these markets. It's fiction. It's completely fictional. No different, although it's a silly example, it's really no different. That's the way I see it. We're already over the cliff. There's no way to go back. You can't. There's only one direction, and it's down. We just haven't realized it yet. Let's move on. Still plenty of liquidity being added to the markets. The ECB, the Bank of Japan, and the Bank of England buying a combined $200 billion every month. But no. You told me, mainstream media and the deniers, that they were scaling back, that they are now everything being fine globally, and that we don't need to worry anymore because the US stock market had risen to new highs. That's what I was told repeatedly, over and over and over again. Simultaneously, however, when we look at the actual big picture and stop focusing in on just the S&P and the Dow Jones, let's widen our perspectives a little bit if we could and realize the fact that $200 billion is being pumped into the system every single month. Now that $200 billion, eventually, it might take 2 years or 10 years or 20 years or anything, but that money eventually swashing all around might make it into US equities. It might make its way into commodities or real estate or anything else. We don't know. But the fact is that this fictional money being printed up is being put out there into the system, buying the worst garbage possible and keeping this system alive. Let's be honest. Let's be real. Brussels is starting systematically to shut out British groups from multi-billion euro contracts and urging companies to decamp to one of the 27 remaining EU members as it prepares for the Brexit. This is big news, I do believe, because after the signing of Article 50, we can see the retaliation. This is official, at least it has begun. We don't know how long it will take. But essentially what's happening here is a little bit of a war. I'm very proud of what has happened with the UK, and I do believe that it ends up happening and they can totally leave the EU and don't have to be taken in with those shackles. I don't know what it's going to spawn off into. That's really my worry, because of course the UK still wants to do trade with Europe. I'm sure that's what they want to do. They just don't want to have the shackles on them. I mean, what a crazy thought. Let's keep our eyes on what's happening here, because this will be sort of seen as a punishment to the UK, and I want to know what happens. Just months before banks stop giving trading clients market research for free, they're still locked in discussions about how much to charge. I won't get into the article, but essentially they can't make up their mind. How much do we charge these people for all of this market research? And you know that there are these meetings going on in these boardrooms and everyone's wearing their wonderful suits and ties. They have their catered lunches and everything is just great. However, you have a bunch of people who literally don't know how to tie their own shoelaces, and they're there deciding what to charge other individuals for their garbage, useless analysis. If you want to know what's going to happen in the market, you need to see what's happening with the central banks. They create liquidity. They determine which way the stock market moves. Does it move up? Does it move down? It's all dependent on liquidity. That is absolutely essential. More young adults lived with their parents than spouse in 2016. I just talked about this recently, in fact. Now we have the statistics, and you could see it in chart form if you'd like. Now, I would say that if an individual wants to live with their parents for many, many years, that is totally fine. But if you live with your parents because you simply can't afford to move out, then we have a problem, and that is showing up on the statistics right now. People accumulate more debt, and in these years, it's comparing 1975 to 2016, and the more debt there is, the less chance these people are going to be able to move out. They don't have the ability, if they're employed, to pay that debt off fast enough, and then they want to move somewhere. Where do they afford a home when many of these cities, a lot of the most populous cities, are very much, the housing has become very expensive, whether it's Manhattan or San Francisco. You see that the prices have gone up, and this trend is going on not just in the US, but other places as well. France's far-right National Front stepped up its anti-European Union rhetoric on Wednesday. Check this out. The number 2 to Le Pen said, "You'll see, we'll soon stuff your oligarchic rag in the cupboard." And just the fact that they would call the EU flag an oligarchic rag is so powerful. And it's so great to hear that, you're actually hitting back at those who aim to control us. And we need to support that, at least that freedom of speech, whether you agree with the party or not. I'm not going to read the article here. This is talking about the violence in Venezuela. I will regularly cover the situation in Venezuela. What's happening right now is that the opposition party has called on millions of people to take to the streets in anti-Maduro protests. And it has happened, and they are asking for even more to happen. I don't know what this is going to escalate to, but the army is going to have to be called out, and they want this to expand and accelerate. They want a reason to bring the military onto the streets to squash people's skulls. And this goes most notably for the US. But look at Venezuela and how it is decaying so rapidly, and the people there are suffering to such a degree, and people still deny what's happening. I don't even understand how. Everything's fake news now, apparently. Doesn't matter what it is, it's fake news. You can't have any real news anymore. Everything's fake news. Look, people have been making it very clear. Individuals that live there in Caracas, talking about the situation, talking about how dangerous it is. I've heard firsthand from people who live there about how bad this situation is, and there are some people out there still calling this fake news. Maybe there are some fake news out there, I don't know. But I've heard it from the people who are on the ground talking about the situation. And this is going to expand to major cities around the world. They will erupt into flames, and it will be the same reasons. Economic servitude. Then we have this. What else is new? The war is being expanded. Marines headed to southern Afghanistan, where the Taliban are reversing previous victories. The wars cannot be over. When you're bombing random caves out there, I assure you the war is never going to finish. Who are you killing? Who are you trying to find? These people that they're fighting have essentially nothing. Stop bombing them, and they'll worry about their own problems. You're giving them a reason to fight. But of course, that's not what this is all about. This is about the military-industrial complex ruling and controlling everything. We all know that. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. If you want to see Janet Yellen in a hot tub, please give me a thumbs down. And if you found this video informative, I know you'll find my books, The Money GPS, even more informative. My books are available at Amazon. It allows you to actually flip through the book to see if you like it for yourself. Take care. Preceded a credit cycle downturn. And by the IMF's calculations, companies with almost $4 trillion in assets, or 22% of the total U.S. corporate assets, would be weak or vulnerable to a fiscal expansion that went wrong and led to a sharp belief that while their activities and actions are terrible, their reports are actually good. The problem, according to fund economists, is that already corporate credit fundamentals in the U.S. have started to weaken, creating conditions that have historically... The financial crisis part 2 is apparent. It's in our faces, but we just have to open our eyes. The weakness which was exposed leading up to 2008 were never corrected. Today, the same issues have been multiplied as they branch out into new levels of financial insanity. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today, I have decided to pack more articles, more information than I should into one video. Let's see how it goes. Beginning with this. The IMF regularly releases reports, and I do rise in borrowing costs. We're talking about the increase of interest rates. Even the BIS, the Bank for International Settlement, says that 250 basis points would be disastrous, particularly for Canada. We are looking at the IMF, and we